Hey guys, I got Matan Griffel here, CEO of 1 Month.
Hi.
What up? And teacher of 1 Month Rails and 1 Month Growth Hacking.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff. So Matan has been doing most of the hiring here at 1 Month, and I would say has been doing a great job and has a lot of experience hiring developers.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think we've been lucky so far, but we have a really great team.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. What do you look for in a great developer? As in, like, how do you know? How would you know if one developer was better than another?
I think hiring developers is especially tough. Um, it's tougher if you are not technical because a lot of the quality of what they're doing is not necessarily apparent on the outside, like it might be in another role. Um, a good developer is going to be someone who not only is writing nicer code than someone else, right? You could take a bad developer and a good developer, and they might produce something that looks very similar, but one is just structured much better, or might be much faster because of how it's written, or might be much easier to update than another one. They say that the difference between a good developer and a bad developer can be like 100 times. Like a good developer might be 100 times better than a bad developer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Whereas with other roles, like that's not really going to be the case. You might be twice as good.
Right. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
The number I've heard is 10 times, but I think that's implicit in it, is that it's just like some crazy like exponential number. And also, we've had this conversation before about paying developers, because it's interesting.
Yeah.
You could find somebody who's how did you put it? It was like you can't, even the bad developer, you're only going to pay like, maybe you're going to pay them like 50 or 60 or 70.
Exactly.
And then like the really great developer, you might be paying double, like 120, but they may be like 10 or 100 times better. Like, it doesn't add up. So how do you understand that?
That's one of the toughest things, I think, for people to swallow initially, is when you see a good developer might be making $150,000 a year or more.
Right.
At big companies like Google, you're going to be making way more than that.
Yeah.
But a bad developer is not really making that much less.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Right.
Unless they're very entry level, like right out of school, for example. So you might want to try to save money by hiring someone that's less expensive, but what you're really doing is getting like a tenth of the efficiency or a tenth of the quality just for half of the price, which isn't really worth it.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you decide? Do you have any tips for what you would look at if you had? I know you care about sourcing a lot, so having maybe 5 to 10 applicants, is that pretty much what we do here?
Yeah.
Getting them through some kind of screening, but when you get to the point where you're gonna bring them in for an actual interview, what do you do? Like, how do you know what to do?
So I think there's a few things. Like, you're looking for characteristics of good developers, and a few things to look at would be like being really interested in the kind of technical problems that your product is solving, almost like geeking out about that, right? The kind of interest that would lead someone to, if you hear stories about them not having known how to do something and then learning how to do it overnight, being able to turn stuff around quickly is a great sign, right?
Great.
As a developer, you're always learning new things. It's not like, mastery doesn't mean that suddenly you know how to do everything, right? Mastery often means that when you're faced with a new challenge to deal with that you've never solved before, that you're able to pick up on that very quickly. And so one great story that we heard about, our developer was he was able to, someone gave him a challenge of this mobile app that he had to not develop from scratch, but he took someone else's mobile app and he had to totally change it around. And they thought this is going to take him like 2-3 weeks at the very least, and he had it done in 2 days.
No way.
And that's like, he's never done it before.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to figure out stories of tell me about a time when you were able to quickly learn something. What was that like? What were the frustrating parts about that?
So that's a good question. So tell me about a time when you were able to quickly learn something, or when there was something like really frustrating.
Yeah. A challenge you ran into. You really want to figure out how are they going to deal with these challenges. One bad sign would be like over focusing and over fixating on a specific problem that may not be important. You want them to be able to prioritize, to be able to step back and say, this may not be worth my time right now. And that's a problem that everyone runs into, but it can be especially bad for a developer. If there's a bug in the code, it's the kind of thing where you might waste hours of your day trying to fix.
And
if you're managing that developer, they're wasting your time, and you might not know that. And so to have that level of, that ability to step back and to see that will save you time.
That's awesome.
Working with people is really important. So the ability for them to explain something complicated to you in ways that you understand, that's a tough thing to find, but it's going to be so important for you, because otherwise you're going to end up in these conversations where you are, you don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And so it's going to be frustrating for you, or you might just sort of nod along and like pretend you know what you're talking about. But they may be asking you something important, right? So it is possible to explain something in a way that you understand, and so that it's a bit more of a challenge. It's a little more than just being a good developer, right? But if these people are ever going to be working as part of a team, then it's going to come in handy when they're working with you as a non-developer, or when they're working with other developers as well.
Great.
The relationships that come about when even 2 or 3 or 4 developers come together matter a lot, because you can have someone who's an amazing developer, but people don't like working with him, or he doesn't like working with people, and that's also not very helpful.
Interesting.
So those are just at like the personality levels. Right.
Those are some good tips, and those are things it seems like you can start to get at from cultural and a personality level. Personal, like you said about challenges, like all this stuff that not necessarily you don't need to know how to read their code at this stage. This is like a first pass at this person.
Then there are, I'd say, 2 other things, like actually being able to look through their code and to see if it's quality can be useful, and then working with them on projects is more important than I think either of those.
Like a paired programming thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So you can, based on someone's code, there's a few things you can look at, right? You generally want code to look simple. Right? Really good code looks very elegant, looks very simple.
At this point, you probably need to be able to read the code, though. I mean, if you can't read it, it's going to look all crazy to you. You're going to be like, this is crazy.
Yeah, that's true. And so, it won't make much sense, if you're not able to look at it. But there's a few rules of thumbs. I look for files that are not very long. Generally just stuffing everything in one file is a sign of a disorganized mind. If someone relies a lot on their own knowledge of something, then they're not maybe building it in a way that's easy for other people to understand. So you don't want them to do it in such a way that like you have to then bring them back in, or rely on them to even understand how the whole thing works. If you don't know how to look at code, try to figure out, is there someone that you can have take a look at it and just give you a good sense of like, what's good about this, what's not good about this. Comments generally are a really good thing to look for, and that's something you'll notice. It's just written in plain English, and because they can write, in English, like here's what this thing is doing above that. If your code is totally uncommented, then it usually means the person's not thinking about other people while they're writing their code and how other people are going to understand it.
And we talk about that in the class when we go through commenting. So that's
Exactly.
awesome. That's great. That's good feedback.
And then actually working on something is, I think, an essential thing before
working
you
together
actually
on a project. And
so that might look like either something a little more extended, like a week-long, take off a feature of something that you'd want to build, not the whole thing, but just a tiny little piece. Walking through them on that, or walking with them on that. You can do it for like an hour or 2. You can just schedule a session and have them just like walk you through stuff as you're doing it. I like to do pair programming because I'm more technical, so I like to actually sort of code with them on the same computer.
And that's you coding, or actually, if an interview would be their coding, or how do you structure it?
Well, pair program is really, it's a mutual activity. So pair programming is what you're going to be doing just like at a company on a day-to-day basis, because it leads to, interestingly, way better written code and more productivity, even though it would feel like it takes longer. You end up having to explain to someone what you're doing while you're doing it.
Sure.
And then the other person, might take over and say, oh, I would do it this way.
Right.
So what you're doing is you have one computer with like 2 keyboards and mouses. So you can, have the trackpad or just be able to switch back and forth. So it's not like, a pure test where you're literally just watching over their shoulder, but it's something where you're getting more involved, ideally. Stay away from I know it sounds kind of contradictory, stay away from the like on-the-spot quizzes and puzzles. A lot of people think that, in order to evaluate a good developer, you ask them like to solve a really tough problem, to like write a sorting algorithm or do like what's called FizzBuzz, right? It's like a type of computer science challenge, and see how they solve it on the spot. That's extremely stressful for a developer, even a good developer, and they may not be able to do it right then and there because they're nervous and you're watching them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they're not a good developer, right? Because they may be able to go home and just like do it immediately, right? Or a lot of good developers.
You're saying stay away from a lot of the coding interview, like cliche kind of questions.
Yeah. Not only are they not very helpful, you're gonna like annoy them. They're not gonna want to work with you if you do that. I hear a lot of backlash from developers who are like, you wouldn't believe what kind of stupid question they ask me.
Yeah.
And in real life, they're like, I would just go online and like download some library to do this.
Yeah.
I would never do it myself.
Yeah.
But pair programming is slightly different because it's supposed to be a much more relaxed environment. You're really talking this out. It's not 5 minutes to do this thing. It's like actually walking through how they would do it.
Awesome. Great tip.
Yeah.
Cool.